Hey everyone, it's the Kung Fu Genius, aka Alex Richter, and we have a new deal for Kung Fu Genius fans. If you go to citywt.com, you can buy any 2 of our apparel and get 1 free, and that includes the new City Wing Chun gym shirt like the one I'm wearing in the new color. Any apparel, you buy 2, you get 1 free. Just go to citywt.com and use the code KFGB2G1. That's KFGB2G1. Use that code at CityWT to get 1 free apparel with your purchase of 2 of anything, t-shirts, all that good stuff. And before we get started, if you could do me a favor and don't forget to like this video, comment on it, share it on social media, help us get the word out there. That's a tremendous help. And if you listen to us on audio, don't forget to review the podcast wherever you listen to it. And with that, let's get started.
All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will answer all sorts of hot nonsense from YouTube. Lots of gems, lots of living rent-free in your head, lots of Bruce Lee's biceps slowed him down, homie. Let's get to it.
He is unstoppable, unbeatable, unbelievable. He's Alex Richter, the Kung Fu Genius.
And every day, I practice martial arts. Watch out! Word is, I'm a Kung Fu genius. Practiced all day like a genius.
Yo, Dre, how you doing, man?
Oh, I'm doing good, Sifu.
So we're back. It is another AMA Ask Me Anything episode, which is
AMA.
basically our new format.
Feel
So
it, MA.
I think
MAA.
MMA. All right. I once went to a martial arts convention, for business, for school owners, like how to do business better.
Yeah.
And a lot of the schools that go there are like, big karate schools with like lots of kids programs and stuff. Uh-huh. And I'm like the only Wing Chun guy there. And it's funny because like a lot of these karate schools from like the Midwest, this is like maybe 10 years ago, they were like, that typical, I guess you could say, kind of McDojo style karate. Mm-hmm. And they didn't really know much about MMA, but that was like the big trend, right? And I just remember there was this one guy there was one martial arts school owner, and he kept calling it the MMA, which is like what any old person calls anything they don't know. Like, do you have the Facebook?
Yes.
Do you use the Twitter?
Yes.
Have you heard of the MMA? And there was another one who kept calling it MNA.
M&A.
Oh, so do you think I should add an M&A program to my school? Guy was like from,
M&A.
Yeah,
M&M.
Pennsylvania or whatever. So
M&M.
anyway, so like we discussed last time, this kind of format of answering questions that people post on our YouTube channel or on Instagram seems to be the way to go because it allows us to have a wide variety of topics within one episode. And it also means we don't need to prep anything. I don't need to like spend 1 hour talking about the history of Kung Fu tournaments, which no one wants to hear about anyway. And we can kind of, spread, people like history. It's like, it feels too much like learning.
Yeah.
All right.
History
tell
lessons.
Tell me what you think of Imi Bostepe. That's what I want to know, right? So that's what the people want. And
what's that fight?
Can we talk about these things that are 30 years old that no one cares about anymore? Let's open that gaping wound and stick some lemon juice in there, all right? So anyway, that's kind of the way we're going to do it. So I just want to kind of remind everyone that on this episode, go ahead and write below any questions you have, because usually we can't even get to all the questions in one episode. Maybe one episode answers 6, 7 of them. So we'll eventually get to it if we don't answer it on the next one. Think of these as like a bank where you can start writing stuff, and then we'll just pick and choose, and then we'll put them hopefully in a future episode. So go ahead and write in the comments below on YouTube the kind of questions that you want me to talk about, and any types of questions, obviously. Chinese martial arts history, training methods, stuff about Wing Chun, different, maybe some stories about, my teaching or whatever. A lot of people like to ask about, like, what do you think of this guy and what do you think of that guy? Uh-huh. I'm generally going to avoid those kind of things because I don't really find that that's not actually really my opinion about a Wing Chun celebrity or another Wing Chun Sifu is not really anything that furthers the types of conversations that we should be having in Wing Chun. I'd rather talk about things that are more substantive, right? But, any questions you guys can write it in there and hopefully we'll get to it. So, yeah.
All right. So, to begin, we got Christian Creasy. I remember him. All right. How important to keep your anger, pride, ego, check when it comes to, or I should say in check, when it comes to self-defense? I ask because in today's society, you see on the news people shooting at others on the highway, etc. Wow.
Yeah, well, there's nothing to keep your ego in check than someone shooting at you, right? Okay?
Yeah.
I think the moment you hear a gunshot in public, I don't think the ego is actually the problem right there, because you go into full flight mode for the most part, right? I think ego is more involved when it comes to, like, you know, what we call social self-defense, right? Or social violence, I should say. You know, you're at a bar, there's a little too much alcohol. Hey, what are you looking at? What's your problem? And pushing and shoving and that kind of stuff that de-escalates, or that, I should say, that escalates from essentially nothing into like, oh, now we have to punch each other because you looked at me for 1 second too long or something like that, right?
Way too long.
Those kind of situations, I think ego is involved, and usually alcohol is involved. And if you have your ego in check, you can de-escalate the situation, because often in those types of situations, when someone gets angry with you because you violated the high crime of looking at someone for too long, it's about power. That person feels that they lack it, and they need to try to build themselves up off of you. Now, usually those people are not looking for an opponent. They're looking for a victim. So that's why how you handle that situation will often determine whether you get out of it,
pimp slap,
or whether you end up having to actually fight with this person here, right? So there's a couple different schools of thought when it comes to, like, someone just gets kind of irritated with you. What are you looking at? What's your problem? Whatever. It depends a little bit on your internal confidence, right? Like, if you feel super confident that, like, even if this person did come over and try to take a swing at me, I've dealt with people much stronger and bigger than this person in practice. Even though you don't necessarily want to fight, you might handle the situation differently. If you look at this person, you go, yeah, I think even on my best day, this person is more than I can handle. Right. That would also influence how you handle the situation differently. And that you have to have you have to have your ego in check for that, because one of the things that a good martial arts system or good martial arts training should do is it should show you that you're capable of a lot more than you thought you were when you joined, right? Sometimes people join a martial arts school and they're like, well, I'll do it because it seems fun, but in reality, I don't really think I could actually ever punch someone or kick someone or defend myself, right? And other people have the exact opposite problem. They do a month of martial arts training and they think they could beat everyone up, right? And so if you have
we know one or two of those.
You always have. You have both ends of the spectrum in every martial arts school, right? What a good martial arts school should do, especially one where you have some realistic training methods where you're sparring and you're training with different people who are resisting, and then you feel like, okay, I can get these techniques to work, but against certain types of people, it's a little bit harder. Maybe I need to operate a little bit differently with them. And against certain types of people, if they're at a certain level of skill, well, I really have no chance right now with my current level of skill. So a good martial arts school should give you that kind of calibration where you go, okay, against this type of opponent, if they really came at me, I could probably at least keep them from seriously hurting me.
All right.
Against this type of opponent, I might even be able to just outright beat them or dominate them. And against this type of opponent, I have zero chance on my best day and their worst day. And any good realistic martial arts school, you should create this kind of assessment. No chance. I can protect myself, but maybe not beat this person, and I can stomp all over this person. All right?
Right.
A martial arts school that doesn't provide that kind of realistic training, you often may think you can beat up people that you really can't. Or you may still feel the opposite. You may feel like, well, I don't think I can beat up anyone because you've never tried it and you don't know, right? So that's why that is where ego and pride come into check. If you have a good martial arts school, these things will be calibrated. So it's not like ego. You just go, I legitimately know I can't beat that person. Mm-hmm. It's not about ego. It's about realism and it's about statistics. All right. I could probably keep this person off of me for a while I try to get out of there, and I could probably beat this person, right? So that's a fair assessment, and that is a way to kind of learn how to use your ego in a positive way and in a realistic way. So you just know the people you can't beat, you don't need to have an ego about that because you just know you can't beat them. What's the point of having an ego about that, right? And a lot of people don't necessarily learn that, right? Now, when it comes to like predatory violence or someone shooting at you or something like that, well, that's different. Your ego goes out the window there when someone shoots a gun because you only go into survival mode, right?
Yeah.
And I can relate a story.
Most people.
Most people, yeah. I mean, you're right. I mean, people.
Some people just stand and watch.
Yeah, I mean,
Pleasantly.
you have the deer in the headlights. Plus,
Yeah.
also, obviously, if people have military, especially wartime military experience,
They go right into action. Yeah.
They might, or they might get into PTSD. So even that isn't. There's no guarantee how someone reacts either way, right? So again, it's a roll of the dice how you're going to react to these certain situations. I can tell a story from my my teen years. I might have told this story once on Dudes of Kung Fu. But I think it's worth repeating. When I was a teenager, I must have been 16. Well, I was at least 16 because I had my first car. I remember that, and I had a part-time job, and I was working at my job, and it was in the fast. Let's say it was in the fast food industry. All right.
Oh, okay, it wasn't part-time lover.
Yeah, no, it was just it was a first time for kind of a typical first job for like a teenager.
All right.
And I was working, and somebody came in and said, "There's someone outside, someone who I knew. There's someone outside looking at your car." And I was like, "Why?" They said, "Because someone who drove that car shot at his wife in the car that day." And I was like, "What? Someone who had a car like mine shot at someone else? Didn't hit this person or whatever, but apparently brandished a gun, shot towards this car while they were driving, towards the side where the guy's wife was, right? And that guy, understandably, was trying to find out who this person was, right? Goes into the parking lot, sees my car, and misidentifies my car as the car that shot at him, right? And I'm working, and I'm like, I'm 16. I have a little bit of, obviously I had a black belt in Taekwondo.
Right.
And I had a little bit of Wing Chun experience. But I was not the formidable, indestructible tank you see in front of you right now.
That's right.
You had a gun.
Yeah, exactly. So I was a skinny neck teenager. All right. And so I heard this, and I was like, oh man, like, you get that little shot of adrenaline and your heart starts beating because you go like, oh man, because I can imagine that someone out there thinks I shot at his wife and he thinks it's me.
He probably went back and got something
like, this can be something major, right? And and the guy's, he's going to be waiting for you. And, because, basically the guy's accusing me of having shot at his wife. And I'm thinking, first of all, I've been working, it was like on the weekend, I was working a full 8-hour shift. I'm like, I've been working since whatever in the morning. I'm like, plus I own no guns. And even if I owned a gun, I would not shoot said gun at anyone. All right.
Right.
Let alone out of my car in broad daylight. Okay.
Goodness.
So you can imagine it's a little bit like when, at the end of the school day, the school bully is going to, want to kick your ass or whatever, right? And, then throughout the day, some people were coming in like, yo, this guy's going to be waiting out there for you. And somebody said, this guy, whose wife he accuses me of shooting at, he's not going to come in. He's going to wait for me. And he is like a big black guy. And I'm thinking that I'm going, shit. All right. This is that my heart is going,
starts to come out your
right?
boot.
And I'm just like, oh man, this is not
big
this is
black
not gonna
guy.
this is not gonna work out well, right? And I'm thinking like, like how am I gonna manage this, right? And then so I somehow managed to get a friend to come over, all right? But this friend of mine was not some formidable dude. He was another dude who looked like me. But at least I wanted somebody else there with me when I left, right?
Okay.
And mind you, this is also in the times before cell phones and things like that. So it's not like, I'm going to live stream this dude or something like that, right? So at the end of the day, no, I think it was a later shift because as I recall, when my shift was over, it was dark. It was nighttime. So I wasn't there in the morning. It must have been like a later day shift,
Afternoon to night.
So it's nighttime. I get off maybe 10 o'clock, something like that. I get in my car. I'm looking around. There's no one there, right? My buddy's with me. And I go like, all right, well, I guess the guy, left. I get in my car. I pull out of the parking lot, and suddenly, shoom, this car comes up right behind me. Like this far behind me, right? And I just go, and it's these flashing the beams and stuff like that. And I'm just going like, oh man, this dude's going to follow me, right? And then where I worked, it was like a strip mall, but I lived in like Issaquah, Washington. And at that time, Issaquah, Washington was like, there was a lot of stretch of road where you're just going through forests, right? Now I went back to Issaquah a few years ago, and it's all built up. Like they literally built a house on anywhere where there was a tree, there's a house now. But back then it was like there's a strip mall, and then you go like 3 miles down, it's nothing but like a road through forest, you know? So like you're in the dark there, and then there's another strip mall, and then dark, and then strip mall, right? So I'm driving, and like this guy's really on my tail. Like he's almost touching my bumper.
You know, yeah.
Right? And then something changed in me. I ceased being scared. And
you're getting pissed about this
got
guy.
Angry. It was like, you ever see the Sylvester Stallone movie Over the Top, the arm wrestling one?
Yes.
You know what happens
recently.
when he turns his hat around? It's like a switch. And in that moment, I was like, I don't care how big this dude is. I wasn't the one who shot at his wife. It literally wasn't me. Okay? It wasn't me. All right? And I'm going like, this is some bullshit. So I pulled my car over the side of the road. I just pulled it over with that dude right behind me. And I got out, and I slammed my door, and I started walking towards this guy.
Yeah.
Knowing full well that this was a big dude, and he's angry. And I just walked right up to him. And I said, dude, whatever you think happened, it wasn't me, okay? I've been at work all day. Now you're chasing me. You're trying to sweat me. You're trying to make me intimidated. But you know what? I don't even own a gun. I don't even know how a gun works, okay? If you put a gun in my hand right now, I couldn't even load it. I don't even know how to shoot a gun, all right? And you think that I shot at your wife. That is insane, and it wasn't me. And I remember, like, looking up and yelling at him. And he looked at me, and he said, I'm sorry. And he got back in his car, and he left. And he left. And he drove off. And I realized that that was an important lesson for me. Because
you just got to Hulk out.
Well, no, it's not even that. It's your internal response to violence often has something to do with whether you're in the right or not. Let's say you have a sister, your mom, whatever, someone you really care about, and someone harmed them. And this person was bigger and stronger than you. You wouldn't care. You would want to rip this person's face off for hurting someone you cared about.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have that fear. But that same person, if he's next to you in a bar and he starts getting in your face, you'd be like, oh, man. Like, you'd be really worried that you could get knocked out for nonsense. And I realized something, and this worked for me. I don't know if this is relevant for other people.
All right.
But I feel that the level of fear you have, provided we're not talking about predator, people broke into your house, a house invasion, people are waiting, like that's a different story. We're talking about the more social violence. The more afraid you feel, the less likely it is that you actually have a legit reason to fight. Because your ego is telling you, maybe it's not worth it, because you could get seriously hurt for what? Because the guy thought you looked at him?
For no reason.
Because for something else? And then your brain goes, maybe not. Because to a certain degree, that fear, while it can be detrimental in certain situations, could also be telling you, what the F are you doing, man?
Yeah.
But when you're in a situation where it's about this person is clearly in the wrong, like this person who accused me, or if someone, I tell you, man, if someone did something to my mom, I don't care who he is.
Yeah.
I don't care if he's Brock Lesnar. I don't care if he smashed me to pieces.
Right.
You will stand up to that guy if he hurts someone you love. That, for me, is the test. Do I feel like this is actually something really worth it? And most of the time, the reason why people feel that overwhelming adrenaline dump is because it's not. You're getting into a fight for some petty BS reason. That's why the fear is kind of telling you, this could be your life. For what? For what? You spilled some beer on the guy's shoes or something like that. You know what I mean? And so that's a little lesson I have about ego and fear and things like that.
Wow. Good question.
Mm-hmm. I know, I was there.
Good answer. All right, next up, we got Miguel C. C for Alex. What are your thoughts on the history of Wing Chun and how today's Wing Chun might be a shortened version of a much broader curriculum? Thanks.
Well, this is a good question. I mean, again, when you are trying to traverse the minefield that is Chinese martial arts history, okay? The thankless minefield, all right? You really cannot say for sure. I actually talk about this in my upcoming book on the wooden dummy, which I should be finished with very shortly. I have a whole section on the history and development of the dummy. And I basically talk about, like, look, most of what we know about the history of Chinese martial arts is written by the winner. You know, you have popular lineages. They have their theory about the history. And that's what gets pushed out more. Why? Because there's more people telling that story than another counter story or counter narrative. So most of what we believe about Chinese martial arts history or Wing Chun history or whatever is really kind of written by the winners, all right? But that doesn't make it true. It doesn't make it remotely true.
Okay.
But then the problem is that there's this kind of typical counter narrative where you have from people, and I'm not going to mention names, but they're so-called Wing Chun historians out there. And what you often find with a lot of these Wing Chun historians is that they find, the original Wing Chun actually had insert 5 things that let's just say Yip Man Hong Kong Wing Chun didn't have or doesn't have, all right? Actually, the original Wing Chun had this style of internal training, or the actual ancient Wing Chun had a few more weapons or a few more forms or a few more this, all right? Now, first of all, there's no real way to prove that, because what's really happening is you're just taking someone else's word as truth. All right. Mm-hmm. Why does someone vehemently believe that the Wing Chun was founded by Nun, Moy, and Yim Wing Chun? Why do they like, no, this is really it? Because the Sifu told them. Why does the other person say this is total BS? Actually, Wing Chun used to be part of this style, which broke apart, and then it was this, and then it was this. Because that's what their Sifu told them. All right. Why does this person vehemently believe in this religion? Because that's where they grew up and that's what they were taught. Okay. But the other person believes just as strongly in their religion simply by fate of having grown up in another area, all right? So the problem is a lot of people are swayed by what some Chinese people tell them because these people tell them with conviction, with emotion. Mm-hmm. But no matter how emotionally strong someone tells you something, how emotionally charged a statement is, doesn't make it more true. You understand what I'm saying? Right. All right. You can spew the biggest BS, but you say it with absolute conviction. All right. People will tend to believe it more, but the way that it's told doesn't make it more true. Okay. So there's a lot of this counter narrative, and it's based on some traditional Wing Chun people. It's classic Wing Chun people. The problem is you can't even say traditional Wing Chun people because William Cheung has stolen that term traditional Wing Chun, right? For his own style, right? But when I say traditional Wing Chun, I mean it in a generic sense. I don't mean William Cheung's style, right? So that's why I sometimes have to use classical Wing Chun or classic Wing Chun just so I don't mislead people into thinking I'm discussing William Cheung. So in classical Wing Chun, some, let's say, Hong Kong style Wing Chun people, they some of them fought really well and some of them didn't fight that well at all. All right. And oftentimes the first thing that gets the blame is the style. All right. So-and-so lost the fight. That's because Wing Chun is XYZ. All right. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine if every time someone lost in UFC, people would say MMA sucks because an MMA guy lost. All right. And you're like, well, they're both actually MMA guys. Right? Okay. No one says, and see, you don't, like, if you watch 2 kickboxers fight and one kickboxer loses, you don't say, man, kickboxing sucks because kickboxing lost. All right. But in traditional martial arts, people are more subjected to that kind of thinking, right? If a Choi Lei Fut guy loses to a Wing Chun guy, Choi Lei Fut must suck. Instead of, that Choi Lei Fut guy was not as good as the Wing Chun person that they fought.
Right.
Or if the Wing Chun person loses to the Choi Lei Fut guy, Wing Chun must suck. Instead of, that Wing Chun guy is not as good as the Choi Lei Fut guy that they fought, right? Now, of course, we can have a deeper conversation about the methods and what, like, of the particular style and whether they were suitable for that type of arena or that type of fight or that type of opponent. That's a separate thing. But if we put everything on a level playing field, all right, Wing Chun for a certain time period in the 50s and 60s was very dominant in street fights and and challenges with other martial art systems, mainly through Wong Sun-leung and William Cheung and a number of other people. And but that doesn't mean that there were not Choi Lei Fut guys who weren't bangers at that time or other styles as well, right? But obviously Wing Chun people are going to focus more on their Wing Chun wins. Choi Lei Fut people are going to focus on their Wing Chun wins or their Choi Lei Fut wins. Yeah, well, I'm going to say they're going to focus.
Wing Chun losses.
The Choi Lei Fut guys are going to focus on every time they beat a Wing Chun guy. It's going to be like, the big win for them, right? So, which is funny because there was a Northern style master that I met. He's very old. He's one of the founders of the Hong Kong Chinese Martial Arts Association. His name is Long Kai Ming. And Long Kai Ming, he's quite old now. And his father was his teacher. And his father was also like one of the main guys teaching Northern style Shaolin martial arts and things like that. His father, all right, taught in the 40s and 50s. And one of his father's students, okay, so Lung Kai Ming is the son of, his father who's the master, but one of Lung Kai Ming's Si Heng, so someone who started before he did under his father, had a fight with Bruce Lee. And Bruce Lee actually wrote about this fight in his Daytimer. It was one of the last fights that Bruce Lee had before he came to the States. And
I think we went over this fight.
And when I talked about it with John Little briefly, because Bruce wrote about it in his Daytimer. And one of the things that happened in that fight was, in the very beginning of that fight, the person he was fighting was getting a bit of an advantage over Bruce and managed to give Bruce Lee a black eye. And, Bruce was kind of on the losing side at first. And then, but apparently the story was Bruce thought that they were going to have more of a kind of a friendly sparring match, which is always like, there's a great line in Prodigal Son, which is like in Chinese martial arts, there's no such thing as a friendly match. If I'm a Wing Chun guy and you're a Choi Lei Fut guy, and we're going to have a friendly match, all right? Do you really want to have a friendly match where maybe you hit me twice, but I hit you 3 times? No, because in your mind, you're going to think I'm putting down your style.
Yeah.
What the F is a friendly match? What is that? All right? Maybe you have a friendly sparring match between Kung Fu brothers within the same, or Kung Fu members within the same style. Can you really have a friendly match between people of 2 opposing styles? No, because in your mind,
my style is better.
Yeah, and you're not gonna you're gonna let the dude playfully tag you one more time than you tag him? No. All right. So anyway, Bruce Lee agreed to this, supposed sparring match, and apparently then the other guy, the student of Lung Kai Ming's father, who I cannot remember his name right now, unfortunately, but obviously his father's name is also surnamed Long, right? And I think it was a Long Qi Leung or something like that. Okay. But I have to double check that. They start off and then he takes it more seriously and ends up cracking Bruce and giving Bruce a black eye. And then Bruce got really angry. And Bruce, really came in at this guy with chain punches and ended up knocking out that guy's tooth, and the other guy fainted. All right? Supposedly, that was actually Bruce Lee's last fight, because that happened after the Gary Elms boxing match. And so this fight happened in Kowloon City, so very near to where the old airport was. And apparently that was Bruce's last fight in Hong Kong before he went to the States. And supposedly that kid, his father was the one who was a detective, and that was the reason why Bruce got in a little bit of trouble. But again, it's very difficult to confirm, right, with these stories or whatever. But anyway, Bruce wrote about it in his Daytimer, right? And so, so there you go. Even the great Bruce Lee faced a little bit of adversity or whatever, right? So to kind of circle back to this question, it's very easy to blame the style for certain deficiencies if someone lost, all right? Instead of saying, well, okay, that practitioner maybe wasn't ready or so on and so forth. And then to say, but you know what? You know the reason why these Hong Kong guys are not fighting so great anymore? Because they didn't learn the true older version of the Wing Chun. And the older version of the Wing Chun was actually somewhat related to Tai Chi and had all of this internal stuff and all of these extra forms. And it's always the older style usually had more forms, more secrets, more special scrolls, more internal chi, rooting, weapons, forms, methods, whatever, right?
It's always the thing we haven't learned yet.
It's always that, right? And then I go, okay, so basically, but you know what it is? It's a way to make an excuse to us, even though they want to prop their older version of Wing Chun, which has all these extra bells and whistles and, packages as being like more complete.
Okay.
But actually what they are is they're almost like religious apologists. The reason why the Wing Chun guys have lost against MMA guys or against boxers is because they're not actually doing the real complete Wing Chun. But I mean, that's what it is. So what it is they use that to kind of prop themselves up. If that Wing Chun guy's only doing the Yip Man version, which doesn't have all this internal stuff, doesn't have all this, doesn't have all that. Okay. So take your ultra traditional Wing Chun with all the bells and whistles and the secret missing ancient knowledge, and you go fight Chiu Xiaodong, the MMA guy.
Yeah.
Or you go, like, the thing is, don't talk to me about how a Yip Man guy came into your school and you wrecked him or her in Chisao, okay? Because
Right.
first of all, when someone comes into your school as a visitor, they often come because they want to learn something. So they come in a slightly more passive role. Do you know how many people visit me from other schools, other lineages, and they want to come and do a lesson with me, and I show them stuff, and they're not like crazy fighting back, trying to do whatever, and I can show them like, hey, look, you can do this, and then maybe they even try to attack me, and of course, I can show them, how I can do something maybe that they can't. Because there's also a certain psychology of them being in my school, and this is not an all-out death match.
Okay.
But many of these sifus think they are. Like, oh, this guy came from this school into my school. We did some Chisao and I totally destroyed him. And maybe that guy was just sitting back seeing what you had to teach them.
Yeah.
Okay? And that Sifu takes that as a win. And the other person was like, oh, I just wanted to see what this person had to offer. And it's like, oh, you thought that was a fight? No. I came because I wanted to learn something. People don't understand. There's a difference between I can learn something from this person and I think this person can destroy me in a fight. All right? Do you think Mike Tyson couldn't have knocked out Cus D'Amato when he was a teenager? Flattened the old man out?
All right.
But who did Mike Tyson learn from?
Exactly.
So sometimes people don't understand. You don't have to be the best fighter to be someone who can teach me something. I just want to see if you can teach me something. But a lot of these egoist Wing Chun guys think, I totally showed that guy how much better I am. It's like, oh, you thought that was some kind of comparison or fighting? I came as the Zen people say to taste your tea.
Uh-huh.
That wasn't a fight, homie. All right, fights look a little bit different, right? So these Wing Chun guys, these super ancient, I know all the secret 20 different lineage Wing Chun guys, take these things as some kind of moral win, and it's like no. You wanna throw shade on the Yip Man Wing Chun guys for having a less than stellar record against some modern. Maybe they haven't upgraded their Wing Chun or whatever. You go fight Chiu Xiaodong and then show me how you can, with your internal mastery, toss him over, or how you could stop him from punching you. The truth is they can't, all right? Because I'll tell you, even if the claims are true, that this older there was a broader, bigger curriculum with more shit back in the day, all right? 200, 300 years ago, they weren't solving the problems of someone who has a modern Western boxing jab that's lightning fast and can then go into a double leg takedown and then jiu-jitsu you on the ground. Mm-hmm. And when I say this, people say, oh, traditional martial arts have wrestling. Yeah, I know they have all that stuff. You had a lot of martial arts have a little bit of everything, and some martial arts specialize. All right, you have Shuai Jiao, which is a fantastic Chinese wrestling style, and you have martial arts that integrate. I get it, yeah. Traditional Chinese martial arts had the kicking, punching, throwing, and ground fighting, or kicking, punching, throwing, weapons, whatever you say the 4 categories of Chinese martial arts are, right? Because whatever that is, you say the other person says it's wrong, it's actually this because their Sifu told them that, and they're right only because their Sifu told you something different than what your Sifu told you, right? I don't care, all right? I guarantee you, if you could take the best martial artists in China from 300 years ago, the best fist fighting martial artist from China 300 years ago, he wouldn't last in his weight class in UFC. Wow. Not because that person doesn't have the ability to do it, but because the way the fight would happen, that person has never seen it before. Right. So stop talking to me about like, oh, Wing Chun is missing the dim mak and the special rooted stance and all this kind of, shut up. Go and fight one of those guys. And if you go in there and you can consistently beat those guys, I might listen to you. But when you just have this anecdotal evidence about, some guy from the WT lineage or the WC or some Wong Sun Leung guy came to my school and I totally wrecked that guy in Chisao, as opposed to there's a famous Wing Chun guru out there who told me like, oh yeah, some famous Wong Sun Leung guy came to my school and I totally wrecked that guy in Chisao, and I was just looking at him like, even if that were true, that person maybe just came to see what you had to do and was there in a more passive role. And when you're teaching and showing someone something, that's not the same as fighting. So the problem is all of these claims of the older versions having a broader curriculum that was better or whatever. The problem is they're very imperfect vessels telling you this. That doesn't mean it's not true. But I haven't seen anything that makes me go, oh, okay. That older version of Wing Chun that has all this stuff that the Yip Man version doesn't have, they're better at stopping jab, cross, uppercut, low kick, takedown, triangle choke from the mount than the Yip Man style is. Haven't seen it. All right. And until I do.
All right.
Yeah. Man. That's how I feel about that.
Man. Do we have time for another one?
We do.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, we're at 50 minutes in, and you have to realize that almost 20 minutes of that was you messing up the intro.
Yeah,
right.
So far, this is a 30-minute podcast so far.
You're right. You're right. I like that. Next up, we got Nathan Marinon. So what do you feel, in your opinion, is the least important aspect to train on in WC that other people may overly train on or focus on? Big fan. Wishing you continued success in everything you do.
That's actually a very good question. Again, I cannot speak for all the different Wing Chun lineages because now, just even within the wheelhouse of Yip Man Wing Chun, you have lots of different expressions of that, and you have people who are, you have to view it as like on a spectrum, okay? You have very conservative and traditional representations of Grandmaster Yip Man's art. Like on that one end of the spectrum, more the kind of Moyat way of doing things. They're very conservative, very, very traditional. And then on the other end of the spectrum, even within the kind of Yip Man wheelhouse, you have people who are starting to integrate more modern fighting methods in the way that they train. Mm-hmm. And some of those come from WT. Some of those come from the Wong Sun Leung lineage. Like Ernie Barrios, he's a Cuban brother of mine. He's a Wong Sun Leung guy by way of Gary Lamb. But he's also really big into boxing. He loves boxing. So he has, I think he calls his Wing Chun like applied body mechanics Wing Chun. And so he integrates a lot of kind of boxing training methods in the way that he teaches Wing Chun, right? So it's still kind of the Wong Sun Leung Yip Man style Wing Chun, but it's kind of gone a little bit in that direction, right? And then in our school, we also have a lot of kind of more modern training and teaching methods, right? And other ones as well. Mark Phillips, integrates kind of some kickboxing and self-defense ideas and some jiu-jitsu stuff. And that all still comes out of the Yip Man lineage on the other end of the spectrum from the more conservative styles, right?
All right.
And by the way, I only use Moyat as one example. There are obviously many other examples of the kind of more conservative, more kind of traditional, we keep it exactly the same way we believe the old man did it, compared to some of the other styles where function is more the main issue, right? And so that's why you can't say like, well, the problem with all Wing Chun schools is that they don't, because I would be addressing only some on that spectrum and not others, right?
Yeah, there's always a spectrum.
Yeah, so you can't, it's at this point, Wing Chun is so spread out throughout the world that it's very difficult for you to have any general statements about Wing Chun as an art. I think you can only have some general statements of Wing Chun people, which most of them are kind of annoying. That is a pretty true general statement. People always laugh. Obviously, I have a lot of great friends in Wing Chun, not just in WT, but great friends outside of my own lineage. I consider Sifu David Peterson a great friend, obviously a student of Wong Sun Leung, and other, representatives of different Wing Chun styles, Jim Rosalando from Pinsan Wing Chun. Get along with these guys, and these people are gems of human beings, and they're also excellent in their art. But I also look at them to a certain degree as being exceptions and not the rule. All right, most Wing Chun people in general, all right, are pretty annoying to talk to, because they and the reason I say this is because everyone has the right to feel that their lineage and their version is the best one. All right, you've never met a Wing Chun person that says, this other lineage that I don't practice is way better than mine. Okay? You never hear that. And you're not going to, all right? You might have people who respect other lineages if they're a little more open-minded.
The lineage
right?
I practice is not the best.
It's not the best, right?
Not
It's
at
maybe
all. I wouldn't
maybe
suggest it to
the lineage
anyone.
I practice maybe third best among all of them, right?
Third best.
You would never hear a Wing Chun person say that, right? A more open-minded Wing Chun
Our
person.
lineage is the RC Cola of Wing
Yeah,
Chun.
exactly, right? A more open-minded Wing Chun person might say, like, okay, they also respect these other lineages, right? But you will never hear someone say, the lineage I do is second best, all right?
No.
And so I get it. Like, that's part and parcel to doing it, right? By the way, I have also spent a fair amount of time hanging out with different Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners from different lines. And spoiler alert, it's the same exact thing there,
It's
right?
the same
You will
everywhere.
talk to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu people like, yeah, all those guys are really good, but I'll tell you why my version is better or why the way we practice is better, right? So this is the kind of the tribal nature of human beings. So for people who say, why are there so many Wing Chun, why are there so many politics in Wing Chun? It's like, you only think there are a lot of politics in Wing Chun because you're a Wing Chun person, you only pay attention to that. And people only think it's politics when it's against their own line. All right. So, for example, and this is something kind of funny. Like people always go like, "Yo, man, why is it gotta be about politics, right?" And whenever I hear someone say like, "Write that online," I go, the reason they say that is because someone said something about their line. You know when Wing Chun people have no problem with politics? When two different lineages of Wing Chun are arguing with each other, that's not their own.
Not their own.
Okay. So, for example, if I just pull a totally random example, let's say the Lok Yu lineage and the Choi Shung Tin lineage have beef, and mind you, they don't. Okay.
Yeah.
And also, both of those sifus are passed away, so we would say they're grand students or something. Let's say the two of them had beef.
It's usually the grand students.
No, it usually is, right? Yeah, because all the top guys, they all know each other, right? And you're a WT guy or Wong Sun Leung guy, and you sit back, and you would watch it, like I'm very fond of saying, like Michael Jackson eating the popcorn in the movie theater, right? You know, you're there in the comments, and you're going here. And guess what? Most people have zero problem with that. But you know what? That's politics. These two people can't get along because there's some kind of ancient beef between their sifu. And I'm just making this up as a random. I'm not saying this is actually the case, right? I could have picked any other two, right? And I just chose to pick two that are not close to home. So, you know, they have whatever reason. Oh, this guy pissed off this guy, and and then it's always personal. It's either money or it's personal or ego or something like that, right? And you sit back and you watch that, and no one goes like, man, politics are so corrosive in Wing Chun. No one says that. Because you're just watching two lineages bicker that you can distance yourself from. The moment someone says something salty about your lineage, you go, man, freaking politics in Wing Chun, man, drives me crazy. All right? Why? Because now it hits you in your backyard.
Yeah.
Okay? You know when people also don't have a problem with politics? When they are talking about another lineage. So you go like, because people always feel that their view is relatively objective. So like, let's say I, as a WT person, say have an opinion to be court controversy about the William Cheung guys, of which WT historically had beef with.
Right.
All right. And I'm saying this is not how I think at all, but I'm using a very general example of how most people behave. Well, I'm giving a fair assessment of the William Cheung lineage and what I feel is wrong with the way they do things or the way William Cheung does things politically, right? That's not politics. That's my fair, unbiased assessment, all right? But how would the William Cheung person feel if I say that? Man, I hate politics. Yeah. And then what are they going to do?
Attacked. He feels
They're going
attacked.
to offer their fair, unbiased assessment about Leung Teng.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be, man, politics is so corrosive. So here's the problem. All Wing Chun people are hypocrites on this point. All of them. Massive, massive hypocrites. Because Wing Chun people have zero problems with the politics between two schools or two lineages within the Yip Man family that are not their own. They look at that while eating popcorn. And hey, you know what? I'm also guilty of that. All right? But here's the thing. I like to think I'm maybe half a step above because I can go back and look at the WT politics and I can also sit back and just
Okay.
Because I have nothing to do with that anymore. I left the association. I don't get involved in that stuff. I'm up to date on all of it because I think it's important to kind of know where everyone's mind is. I try not to perpetuate it, but you know, I can look at that stuff like an uninterested third party.
Okay.
But here's the thing.
Without running out of popcorn.
All Wing Chun people, all right, have no problem with politics outside of their lineage. And all Wing Chun people have no problem, I should say most, there's some, most notably those I'm friends with, have no problem with their own personal unbiased assessment of another Wing Chun lineage or Sifu or personality within the Wing Chun style. For them, that's not politics, okay? The moment it gets hurled over their own fence into their walled garden of their lineage, man, isn't politics corrosive? Isn't it terrible? Right? And so I started answering this question and then veered way to the other side there, right? Okay.
Straight into politics.
So, but I think I did that as a big caveat as to there's literally nothing I can say that goes for everyone, all right? Because it's a spectrum. And also I just wanted to kind of lay out the very, very tribal nature of Wing Chun people and how anything outside of their lineage is not politics, either separate or outgoing, but anything incoming suddenly is politics, right? And they're all this way, okay? I'll tell you something, all right? Maybe this might not make some people happy. I have sat down and broken bread with Wing Chun masters, famous Wing Chun masters, high-level people of nearly every lineage within the Yip Man style. And many of them are beautiful humans, and I love them to death. Yeah. But I never met one that didn't have an opinion about another Sifu that didn't feel bad about sharing it with me.
Okay.
And it just further strengthens my hypothesis that people only think it's politics when it gets hurled in their backyard. When they hurl it out, that's an unbiased assessment. Yeah. When someone says something about Leung Ting, no. Leung Ting did this and this and this. I'm just speaking the truth here. This is not politics. Okay? Oh, all right. Also, in the 80s, your Sifu did this and this. Hey, yo, take it easy. Take it easy.
Right.
Don't get so political, all right? Okay? And sometimes, because I can also speak about Sifu Leung Ting in what I hope people see as a kind of very honest and open. I can discuss his flaws without it being judgmental, in my opinion. Because, hey, look, these are certain problems that I have. And when other people don't like him, I can see it. All right. Some people in the comments take that license as, so we could totally bash Leung Ting. Oh. All right. And I go, no. Look, I can tell you about his personality flaws because I've witnessed them firsthand. But I will also tell you that of the things that he did that were really, really great. Yeah. All right. That's not a chance for you to decide you can say that because guess what? I also have a relatively unbiased opinion of other Wing Chun Sifus out there because I've been outside of the IWTA for 10 years, and I can look at certain Sifus, whether it's Wong Saneng or Choi Sung Tin or all these guys here, and go like, hey, these guys are really good at this. But there's also some things, there's always some cracks behind the curtain, no matter who it is, all right? And if you speak openly and honestly about this stuff, but it's not your own Sifu, they're going to be like, hey, what are you doing there?
Hey, take it
I'm
easy.
Literally doing what you just did about Sifu Leung Ting. The only difference is I'm talking about your guy now, and you get pissed. Yeah. All right? So if you really want to say it's not about politics, you got to be that non-political life. All right? And you also, I think, if you really want to say it's not about politics, okay, critique your own lineage. Give me 5 points of critique on your own style.
Ooh.
If you can't do that, you're a politician. You're a politician.
That'll be interesting in the comments.
Yeah. If you cannot critique your own line and say, hey, look, our line is really good. You know, this is what our strengths are. Here's some of the liabilities of some of the things about our lineage, whether it's political or technical or whatever. All right? If you can't do that, you're an effing politician. That's all you are. Or you just don't have enough experience. You just don't know. You're just a beginner.
Vote for Dre.
Right? Exactly, right? So to circle back, all right, what do I feel is the least important thing that most Wing Chun people tend to focus on? I would say it's focusing on what the other Wing Chun schools do. Yeah. All right? It's like you need to focus on yourself and you need to improve yourself. whether the other school does the bong sao too high or too low or with a bent wrist or straight wrist, and that irritates you, that gets your panties in a bunch because it's not the way you do it, all right? How does that affect you? How does that affect you? All right? And the funny thing about people getting upset about how other Wing Chun lineages do things is that it goes, well, if you say the other Wing Chun sucks because let's say they do the bong sao with a bent wrist, there's some styles they do it this way, and you say, wait, if you do bong sao with a bent wrist, I'm just going to grab your wrist and put you in a wrist lock, which I would say is probably a good liability. You should probably have a straight wrist, all right? But people, they don't leave it at that. They go, nah, these guys, they do it like this, and then their whole thing is about, look how stupid those guys are for doing a bent wrist. And I go, yeah, there's a liability doing it with a bent wrist. I agree with you on that. Shouldn't it make you happy that you don't do it wrong? Because it doesn't actually seem to make them happy that they have gotten the correct theology and that they have the real Wing Chun. They're not happy unless everyone else does it too. But they don't want you doing it if you're not part of their tribe. So they literally have created a zero-sum game for themselves in which they want to bitch about how every other Wing Chun style does it, all right? Which is like, well, isn't that what makes your style stand out because you don't do it that way or your style does it differently? Shouldn't you actually be happy about that? Why are you so damn focused on what someone else does? All right? Like, for example, in the world of jiu-jitsu, the very old school guys, like the more Helio Gracie, traditional jiu-jitsu self-defense guys, they're not big fans of leg locks, all right? Especially modern day leg locks. That's something that has really come out in the most, it's been there for a while, obviously, and there's some foot locks and ankle locks in the old Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but the real leg locking game as it is right now, if you don't have a very fleshed out leg locking game, you won't last at the highest levels of Brazilian jiu-jitsu competition nowadays, right? And the old school Gracie guys will tell you, oh, leg locks, that stuff will get you killed in a street fight because you're going for my leg, and blah, I'm just going to punch you in the face, and so on and so forth. And the guys who do the leg locks are like those old school guys. They're out of date. But you know what a lot of the leg lock guys don't do? They don't spend an inordinate amount of time bitching about the guys who don't do leg locks. They just go, yeah, those guys don't believe in leg locks or whatever. We do leg locks and we're going to keep doing it. And they just go and they do it.
Yeah.
But if we were to make a Wing Chun analogy with this Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu analogy, your Wing Chun style, your leg locking Wing Chun style, all you do is spend time talking ish about the non-leg locking Wing Chun style. And you go, oh my God, look, it's so stupid. They don't want to add leg locks to their game. What do they think? They're not blah, 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 blah. And they do nothing but talk about this. Instead of going, hey, aren't you happy you got the leg locks? Why don't you keep training that? Why don't you keep getting better like the jiu-jitsu guys do, right? So I really wish Wing Chun people would maybe have an idea of what the other Wing Chun... I mean, look, it's not wrong to know the XYZ Wing Chun does it this way, the other Wing Chun does it that way, the Wan Kam Leung people stand this way, the Leung Ting people do it like this, the Choi Shung team people focus on... It's this. You need to know that stuff because that also helps you understand how to maybe use your style better or more effectively. But you cannot spend your entire day talking about, let me tell you what's wrong with this Sifu's bong sao. It's like that is what we like to call living rent-free in someone's head. Oh. Someone's stupid bent wrist bong sao, all right? And sorry for people who do bent wrist bong sao, is living rent-free in your head. And you don't even do that bong sao. Damn. That is a serious fail in my opinion. Damn. And that's what Wing Chun people spend their time doing. Bitching about stuff that they don't even practice. Damn. What the hell is that?
Damn.
I know.
Gizmo of Shaolin.
Shout out to Gizmo of Shaolin.
Yeah, man. Shout out.
Do you think he's from Staten Island? Because that's the real Shaolin.
That's it. Exactly. Shaolin Allen. Hello, Sifu Alex. Thank you again for answering my question from the first AMA. But now my question would be, if you were to create a combat sport designed for Wing Chun and other similar Kung Fu systems, how would you go about it?
That's a good question. Difficult for me to answer because I have zero interest in this. I mean, I'm not saying I'm not trying to put any shade on him. Like, oh, I have zero interest in your question. I go, Creating a combat sport designed for Wing Chun is something that has occupied zero space in my head. Again, I've discussed this before. There's this kind of incessant need among certain pockets of Wing Chun people to prove themselves in the ring. Okay? And I've already discussed that if Wing Chun is going to be part of any kind of MMA fighter's arsenal, it would be there in the form of additional little hacks and things like that, right? I still believe that if you were going to use Wing Chun in MMA, you would need to have the same MMA base everyone else has, because that's literally the sport. You need to have some wrestling and some counter wrestling. You need to have some jits for the ground.
Love the jits.
Some boxing and some kickboxing. All right? And then again, depending on your background, it's like volume dial. Some guys are a little more on the wrestling side, some more on the kickboxing side. But those are like the 4 pillars, the 4 legs of the table that is MMA. Yeah. All right? You have to have that regardless. If you're missing one of those,
3-legged.
You can get away with it maybe for a while if you're really good at some of the other ones at the lower levels. But at the higher levels, you need to have decent, like, so for example, people sometimes they talk about Conor McGregor doesn't have really good wrestling. Okay? Because you see that maybe like that might be the weak spot in his game, all right? You say that, but here's the funny thing. If you go in there as someone, you have a sparring session with Conor McGregor, you're just like a normal person that practices martial arts.
Oh, right.
And it's a wrestling session, all right? And you're just like someone with a little bit of kickboxing, a little bit of wrestling, he will out-wrestle the shit out of you. Because even like the guy, I mean, of course, there's some exceptions to this, but the guy with the worst wrestling in UFC could out-wrestle the shit out of someone using pure wrestling who doesn't know any wrestling. And you'd be like, wow, that guy's wrestling is really good. Because they all have to have these 4 pillars, all right? So where do I think Wing Chun would fit in? Well, you would take someone with these 4 kind of pillars, and then you would show, like I say, I think where Wing Chun would thrive the most is in the dirty boxing. The kind of chi sao phase lifting punches, simultaneous controls with elbows, simultaneous controls with lifting punch, slapping things out of the way and hitting, kind of grabbing and hitting and things like that. Stuff in the clinch. I think Wing Chun could augment a skill set for a decent fighter. And also some of the Wing Chun kicks, which you see, those straight shots to the legs. And John Jones is really big on using that stuff. Like they call them oblique kicks, the straight side kick to the front leg, the rear leg, what we almost call like a rear leg front thrust kick in Wing Chun. You see that there. And those things are really nasty, right? So you see some elements of it there. So I've already gone on record that like if Wing Chun is going to be any part of MMA, it would be part of some MMA fighters already existing, skill set where you kind of have like a little hacks here and there to give them a slightly different look, to give them an edge. If you were going to create a fighting contest purely for Wing Chun, that doesn't make any sense for me. Because Wing Chun is a style that's designed to fight against other styles. When you see Wing Chun versus Wing Chun sparring, I don't mean chi sao sparring. I mean like regular sparring. Yeah. It's the most nonsensical orgy of chain punches you've ever seen. Because the Wing Chun, let's just take it on face value, right? Wing Chun is a style. Of course, there are different expressions, and there are people who will definitely disagree with me, and I can live with that. I'll sleep fine. But let's say, for the most part, Wing Chun is a style that acts a little bit like a viper, like a snake. You're there, the other animal's in front of you, kind of taunting you, and that snake is kind of like this. All right? And then when that animal gets too close, boom, the viper just goes all the way in and pounces. Okay. All right? And that's the basic template. All right? It's a bit reductionist. It's a bit overly simplified, admittedly, but it's a good starting point. Go in and then really fast, really ballistic. Because the other styles are going to come in, let's say using an older Chinese martial arts framework, they're going to come in with wild swinging punches, more northern style, or they might move around and come in with some kind of attack. And then the Wing Chun person, even though it's aggressive, it's still defense. Wing Chun, to its core, is really an aggressive counter-striking style.
Right.
All right? And yes, of course, we can attack the person first, don't get me wrong. But it's basically a very aggressive counter-striking style. How do you then put 2 Wing Chun people against each other? Because in theory, it's the same problem like when you have 2 high-level samurai with their swords in the sheath.
Yeah.
down there on one knee looking at each other.
Yeah.
Because it's a dilemma. In Batodo, the drawing of the sword, at the highest level, the person who draws their sword first gets killed. Because the other person just waits. The other person twitches to go for a sword, and the other person's off with his head. All right? And so that's why there's all this kind of famed fights between two Japanese sword masters where they just, for half a day, they just stared at each other until they decided, okay, we're not going to do this.
No.
And then they both leave, right? They have too much respect for each other's skills, right? So in theory, if you have a style that's supposed to counter when someone crosses the magnetic zone, when someone gets too close to you, all right? Well, when you have two of those styles, in theory, of course, this is the difference between practice and theory is bigger in practice than in theory, right? So technically, you would just have two people in the zhongzhou facing each other, going like, you go, no, you go, no, you go. So in theory, it would never actually happen if they were both following the kind of traditional so-called magnetic zone theory, right? Where when the guy crosses that zone like a magnet, you pounce, right? Or like a viper, you pounce, right?
Two vipers going on.
Sifu Chan Chi Man, one of Grandmaster Yip Man's early students, you remember we went out for sushi with him in Hong Kong.
Yes.
And I was sitting next to him and he was showing me all this stuff, the way Sifu Yip Man taught him. And he said, Sifu Yip Man said that Wing Chun is like the cat and the mouse. The cat is just kind of there. And then when the mouse gets to go, boom, it just pounces. But it doesn't hesitate at all. It just shum, it goes all in one fell swoop, right? And that I also feel is missing in a lot of modern day Wing Chun practitioners, right? They don't train the power and they don't train that, that going in. Even I was just re-listening to an interview I did with Sifu Chan Chi Man, which now is going to be in the next issue of Wing Chun Illustrated, and he was talking about Wong Sun Leung when he would fight, and he would have his zhongzhou there, and he was kind of aggressively stalking his opponent. And then the moment he decided to step in, when the guy got too close to him, it was like the decision was made and he was going in. There wasn't a kind of half-hearted kind of thing, right? You went all the way in. And that is, for me, the very traditional template of how Wing Chun is supposed to work. Now, of course, we can say, all right, well, now if you're in there with a boxer who's going to move back and forth and throw feints or whatever, you might need to amend that strategy, all right? And that's why we can add things like street boxing to Wing Chun if you're in that situation. Okay. Self-defense is still a different category, right? But how do you then put two Wing Chun people against each other in theory, right? And then what happens when you suit up two Wing Chun people? They just run into each other and do chain punches. No chi sao, no nothing, right? And if it looks super technical and like they're both going back and forth, well, I got news for you. They're not fighting, they're flowing with each other, okay? So I don't think in theory Wing Chun on Wing Chun fighting in a sports setting actually works or makes sense. Because it actually somewhat goes against the theory of how Wing Chun works. Unless you say, okay, well, we're going to use a kickboxing frame and Wing Chun at close range. Okay, well, then you're not really doing Wing Chun. Now, what are you doing? You're doing kickboxing. We already have kickboxing. Why do I need to invent a new sport? Right. You have Sanda, you have regular kickboxing, you have Muay Thai, right? So I don't think that it makes sense. Now, what I will say is this, because I take a lot of inspiration from the Valenti brothers in Miami. And the Valenti brothers, they teach Gracie Jiu-Jitsu in a very traditional way with a huge focus on self-defense. And one of the things they do is they teach their students how to defend all sorts of like headlock, different grabs, wrist grabs, pulls, all these kind of things, right? And they have many of these, rear bear hug, over the arms, under the arms, frontal choke, guillotine, all these kind of things, right? And they do like a self-defense challenge. And I've watched these things, and I think that they're absolutely brilliant, okay? Yes, it's not an MMA fight, and it's not like an all-out fight. But what they do is you stand basically in the middle, and you're kind of surrounded by a circle of people. And
sort of like a gauntlet.
A bit like a gauntlet. And one of those people will come at you and attack you suddenly with any one of those things that they practice. Like the one guy might come behind you, put you in a bear hug, and you have to do the bear hug defense that suits that situation, right? And the other guy will come and put you in a headlock, and the other guy will come and give you a sucker punch, and the other guy will come and give you a tackle. So basically you're standing there, and you have to now take all of these things that you learned individually and you now have to apply them reflexively. Now, again, this is not a kickboxing back and forth match, but to a certain degree, it actually does represent a sudden surprise attack on the street. Now, mind you, once you're in the middle, you're on. You know that people are going to be attacking you, so you're kind of ready. So it's not exactly the same like you're walking to put the groceries in your car and some suddenly jumps you, right? But it does approximate it a little bit better. So I wouldn't think it would be a contest or a sporting contest. But if you wanted to create something, let's say, somewhat competitive, you could create almost like a Wing Chun
Circle of Death.
Wing Chun Circle of Death self-defense test, where you can start with the parameters. Okay, for the first round, it's a surprise attack. Your hands are down. And anyone in the circle can attack you with any of this. The guy can throw a swing at you. The person can try to tackle you, can do a bear hug, can try to kick you, whatever. And you have to stand there, and from hands down, boom, you have to go into action and do your Wing Chun. And I would even say that the attacks from those in the circle, the instructor should tell those people what to do so that you guarantee a wide variety of attacks. Mm-hmm. You know that dude's a wrestler, so you always think, oh, he's just going to wrestle me every time. Oh, that guy's a puncher, he's going to punch. But you don't know, because now the guy behind you is the one that's going to wrestle you. All right? And so you could do that, and maybe the first round, you have to do from hands down. The second one, you do it in a more classical setup where your hands are up in the traditional zhongzhou. Mm-hmm. The third one, they come up to you, talk some ish, you have to put a fence, and then they take the attack. So you have like the surprise attack, like the predatory assault. You have like the challenge fight version where they come in front of you. All right, they're standing in front of you. You got the zhongzhou, you got to go in and defend it. You have a self-defense version where you're like in a bar, your hands are up, and then they take the swing or tackle or whatever. And then you could have a street boxing version, right? And so I wouldn't say that would be a fighting contest, but I would say there'd be a damn good training method to make sure that you could integrate your punching, kick, and grappling defenses in a pretty stressful and randomized environment.
Lit.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to it. Joe Kennedy. Quick question. Seeing as how you much prefer watching strength and conditioning content over WT content, how has your own strength training affected your Wing Chun training? I know there's a myth that Bruce Lee's biceps would actually slow him down in a fight. What's your personal view?
Well, technically, there's two questions there, right? So the first question is, how has my own strength training affected my WT training, right? So for years, I've always done some base form of strength training, whether it was kettlebells or using the rower a little bit or pull-ups or push-ups or whatever. Like, I always felt that, you know, my Wing Chun training should be augmented with some kind of fitness regimen, right? But in the last year, once we got into the quarantine, as many people know, I decided like, well, everyone, especially when the quarantine and the lockdown first happened, everyone felt a little down, a little insecure, a little unsure.
Juice.
So I decided like, well, let me be an example to everyone who's kind of has to stay at home and maybe is looking for a little bit of guidance and like do a bit of a transformation. Mm-hmm. So I started following Greg Doucette's home and hypertrophy workout. And started doing some strength training and cardio training, in addition to obviously hitting the bag and doing all my regular Wing Chun training. And what ended up happening is I ended up losing about 12 pounds of fat. Or maybe not pure fat, but 12 pounds of weight, I should say. All right, you can't really say 12 pounds of fat, 12 pounds of weight. But I got much bigger. Yeah. And the funny thing is, towards the end of last year, everyone was like, yo, you got so big and jacked.
Yoked.
And the gag is, I actually weighed on average about 12 pounds less than I did before I got big and jacked, right? Right. So I stripped out a lot of fat and gained a lot of muscle. And of course, I recently had shoulder surgery, which is why I haven't been able to do any strength training for 4 weeks, which is why I'm a bit, emaciated these days. I'm still doing cardio, but obviously I can't do anything with my right arm yet. It's still rehabbing. But one of the things that I learned through, because like I said, I've always done kettlebell lifts and swings and things like that. So it's not like I just started doing strength and conditioning last year. But I would say last year is when I really got serious about it, right?
Okay.
One thing that I learned is, and of course it's kind of funny, oh, well, I had a shoulder injury and I had to get surgery. This has nothing to do with the strength training. All right. This was, some old injury and was exacerbated probably from some of the jujitsu and stuff like that I've done, right? And also, when you play the bad guy when you're training your student, right? You have to hold your arm out there so they can see, can he really pak-sao my arm or can she really jat-sao my arm down? So you have to do some things that in Wing Chun, if you tried to press my arm down, I let it go and I hit you with the other hand. I borrow your power, right? But when I'm playing the bad guy as a trainer, I hold my arm really stiff to test my students' pak-sao or jat-sao. So I'm fond of saying, you always eat the most shit or you always get the most injured in Wing Chun when you're the bad guy, right? Right? You don't get injured doing Wing Chun. You get injured being offering resistance for the Wing Chun person to, be able to use those movements better, right? So I would say a fair amount of the injury to my shoulders in general come from having to be a jackass and hold my arm stiffly against someone doing a jat-sao, whereas if I were practicing Wing Chun myself, I wouldn't be doing it. So, but all of that aside, the strength training has actually made me feel a lot better in terms of my energy levels because now I do the 150 minutes of cardio every week, and which I still do now, even though I can't do the strength training. And the strength training often addressed a lot of the things. Like I said, in Wing Chun, you develop certain muscles over others. And so to get some balance, which is good for injury prevention, you want to train some of the other muscles that you don't do as much in Wing Chun, right? So that you get a little bit of balance. And I was sleeping better, generally felt better. And, one thing that I noticed between both the strength training and the cardio is I get hit the heavy bag for longer. And on some days I would come in and I have to teach for almost 8 hours because I have like a nonstop, endless, revolving door of private students coming in, right?
Yeah.
And so every time a private student comes in, and I got some big dudes like Tom, former bodybuilders and other people who want to come. I can't be like, oh, you're my fourth lesson today. I'm a little tired. I'm going to go easy because that person is coming in. They need the Kung Fu genius, Sifu Alex Richter at 100%. Yeah. So one of the things I realized about maintaining a regular strength training regimen and a regular cardio regimen is that, like Captain America, I can do this all day, right? And not a lot of people my age, they can do that. They get tired after a while. Maybe they're really good for the first lesson. Second lesson, they tend to peter out, right? But by maintaining a regular base of strength and cardio, the last lesson I teach a day, I can toss that person just as much as the first person coming in, right? So the ability, muscular endurance and cardio and having a gas tank is probably one of the biggest benefits of having a regular strength training regimen. To answer the second question about the Bruce Lee's biceps slowing him down, all right? Well,
I never heard this.
Well, I don't know where this comes from because, first of all, when we think about Bruce Lee in his peak form, let's say Enter the Dragon, although I would argue he was a little too skinny in Enter the Dragon. I think that's Bruce in a bit of decline because I think his body fat percentage was a little too low to be sustainable at that time. But let's just say Way the Dragon, Enter the Dragon, the time when he was making those final films.
Okay.
Arguably when he had his biggest, strongest biceps. All right. What about Bruce Lee's performance at that time gave you the impression that he was slow? All right. It's a common trope among Wing Chun people that if you want to be fast, you can't train your biceps. Because biceps are, as Wing Chun people are fond of saying, these are your contractors, all right? The contractile muscles, all right? Although all muscles actually contract, right? But they're thinking in terms of like, this is the one that pulls, whereas the tricep is the one that extends, right? And so if you're punching, you need to train, as many Wing Chun people say, your extensor muscles, all right? Which is not even really a word, which are like basically your lats and your triceps, and that if you train the biceps, you're essentially putting on the brake to your punch, all right? Well, first of all, that's not true at all. I mean, if you look at some of the heaviest punchers out there, like if you look at Tyson, or you look at a lot of the...
bicep was Jack. Roy Jones,
all right? When you look at a lot of the heaviest punchers, whether it's MMA or boxing or traditional martial arts, they all had biceps, all right? The problem is that it's a folksy thing.
Okay.
To say like, oh, this is the muscle that you use to pull. So if you train this one too much, that's going to pull your arm back from punching, okay? And where do people usually draw these kind of things from? Because they take a bodybuilder and they try to get that guy to punch or do something, okay? With very rare exceptions, okay? So we have one bodybuilder who's training with us now, Tom Jimenez, right?
Mm-hmm.
High-level professional bodybuilder, all right? And I'll be quite honest. He's not the first bodybuilder I've taught. I've taught many bodybuilders, all right? Now, a bodybuilder is not really a strength athlete like a power lifter or a CrossFitter or something like that. A bodybuilder specifically lifts weights for aesthetics, right? To have balanced physique and to have lots of muscles that are not necessary, that some muscles are too big to really be functional for a lot of sports, not just martial arts. So it's a bit of a straw man argument to say the reason why
straw man arguments.
we hate straw man arguments, all right? Straw man arguments are bullshit, okay? Because it's what people use.
Just fall down.
Well, it's what people use to prove their own point. So what they do is they make up a point that they can easily knock down, a straw man, and say, see, this is why that thing is bullshit.
Yeah.
And often bodybuilders are used as the straw man argument for as to why you cannot train your biceps or why you cannot train your muscles too much or whatever, right? As I mentioned in one of the more recent episodes, okay, you could go to the gym and lift all the weights and you're not going to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger, all right? Let's forget even the fact that you got to take all the horsey sauce to get that way. Gaining muscle, that kind of muscle is metabolically expensive and super difficult to do.
Yeah.
All right, you know, you go in there and you lift and you do all this stuff and you see incremental gains. You do full body splits when we train.
Yeah.
Are you suddenly jacked and ripped?
Not
No.
Arnold style.
And the level of muscle that you've developed, is that stopping you from punching? And you train 3-4 times a
makes me
week.
want to punch more.
Yeah, but you train 3-4 times a week lifting weights, doing cardio, and doing your Wing Chun, and you do bicep curls and stuff like that. Does that stop you from being able to punch? No. It's something that sounds like it might be true, but it's not. And when people are pressed to say, well, prove to me that training your biceps slows down your punches, we'll look at the bodybuilder. And that's a straw man argument because high-level martial artists generally do not have a bodybuilder's physique. All right? Look, Bruce Lee, for all of his muscles, that was not a bodybuilding physique.
No.
If you took Bruce Lee at peak form and put him in a bodybuilding contest, he would lose because he's too small. All right? He might win men's physique in the 70s because of how jacked he is. He would lose every bodybuilding competition in the 70s because he's too small. Mm-hmm. All right? For his height and weight. So Bruce Lee did not have a bodybuilder's physique. He had a very shredded and very muscular physique, but he was not a bodybuilder. Okay? So already you cannot compare that. All right? And when you look at bodybuilders who often don't do other sports, some of them do, and some of them don't. The bodybuilders who don't do other sports generally don't have much strength for the size of their muscles. They're disproportionately weak for the amount of muscles they have. I always talk about there was a bodybuilder who came and did an intro lesson at my school once.
Okay.
And I was like, all right, I want you to kick the wall back. And this guy was a peak bodybuilder. He wasn't a former bodybuilder. Dude had thighs the size of my chest. Okay? And you look at that level of musculature and you go, man, this guy must kick like a horse. All right? Because the dude could probably squat 900 pounds. Wow. All right? He stands in front of the wall bag and he goes to lift his leg. And he can't lift his leg because he doesn't have the flexibility and he doesn't have that kind of strength. Wow. He lifts his leg and he can't really support his leg because a lot of the stabilizer muscles are not as developed because of the way that a lot of bodybuilders train. Okay. He goes, I remember it was so funny because it was like watching someone move through molasses. It was like in slow motion. He lifts his leg and he's like, and he's grunting and making these faces. He's not lifting any weights. He's just lifting his leg. He's like, and he goes to kick the bottom bag. And that kick comes out so slow. And he hits the bottom bag and he literally falls backwards. It was probably, of anyone who's ever walked into my school, like you get the proverbial 90-pound weakling and you say, hey man, kick that bag. They would kick it harder than this bodybuilder did. Right. All right? But see, the problem is you can't look at someone whose entire physical conditioning is for maximizing muscle hypertrophy. That's literally what they're doing. And say, see, that's not functional for fighting. Because no fighter trains that way. Wow. The only quote-unquote martial artists who train like bodybuilders are movie stars. Michael Jai White, you look at him, he trains more like a bodybuilder. He's a movie guy, okay? He's a movie person. He takes all the horsey sauce and he trains like a bodybuilder so that he looks good on camera. Wow. But competitive martial artists, you know, the rare guys who have a somewhat bodybuilding physique are known for gassing out because that is not an optimized physique. So you cannot use the bodybuilding trope to say training your biceps is going to slow down your punch because look at what it does to bodybuilders. Because no one is training like a bodybuilder. No one looks like a bodybuilder, right? Bruce Lee, his biceps were really strong. Yeah, did you see his triceps? Did you see something like, I don't know, his lat muscles?
Oh, okay. The Cobra.
What about how Bruce Lee moved, even if it was movie choreography, gave you the impression that he's slow? So I don't know where this stuff comes from. But it sounds like a bunch of hot nonsense.
Hot nonsense.
And that's all I got to say about that. All right, everyone, I hope you really enjoyed that episode. Again, please comment below. Let me know what types of things you want me to talk about on the next or upcoming episodes of The Kung Fu Genius. And as always, would love it if you guys could like this video, share it with your friends, get the word out there. And also, don't forget, we are on Patreon. You can support us for as little as $5 a month, and you get access to early episodes. And at higher support levels, you get exclusive content like why was Bruce Lee training good mornings and all sorts of crazy stuff like that. So we appreciate the support. And as always, I'll see you guys next time.
Word is I'm a kung fu genius. Technique speaks for me, not lineage. Forget Jet Li, cause I'm the one. Many call me seafood, but to you I'm sea gung. And I produce masters. You surpassed us. Your kung fu stiffer than corpse and caskets. City Wing Chun is the house I built. Violate the gate and your blood gets spilt. Alex Richter, always
the genius will continue to go over some hot nonsense.
No, the genius will answer all sorts of hot nonsense from YouTube.
All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius.
Yes. Dude, wow. He's like going pirate style. All right? You can't do it that way because our YouTube episode we can't have a pirate style for everyone because it'll be rated R.
He pulled a dad joke out.
Why was the farmer good at math? Because he had a calculator. If you don't get it right, I won't stop. I've officially been a dad for 8 years. I got dad jokes for
jokes
years.
for days.
Every time you mess up, we'll go dad joke style. Let's go.
On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will... I feel like I'm looking at you.
Why don't crabs give to charity? Because they're shellfish.
Lots of gems. Cottons. All the cotton.
What did the evil chicken lay?
Oh no! Really, this is gonna happen?
Deviled eggs.
Ah.
One dad joke every time you mess this up, all right?
All sorts of YouTube nonsense hotness.
Hot
nonsense from YouTuber.
Why did the man name his dog Timex and Rolex? Because they were watchdogs. You torture me, I torture you.
Lots of goo-goo de gagas mazalaganazas.
You know what?
Lots of...
My wife asked me to sink her phone, so I threw it in the ocean. I don't know why she's mad at me.
On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius,
I didn't say anything. I didn't say anything.
Yo, wait. I didn't mess it up.
You messed it up.
You messed me up.
Pretended it was my fault. So I gotta ask you something. What's brown and sticky?
A stick.
Ooh. That's true. A stick.
All right, peeps. All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu...
That was your mess up, okay? What do you call a lazy kangaroo? A pouch potato.
Oh. One take, Jake.
Whole day Dre.
Yeah, whole day Dre. That's what we'll call him now.
YouTube hot nonsense. All right, peeps.
Hey, that qualifies as a mess up right there.
No, it doesn't.
Yo, you know what you're acting like? You're acting like a fake noodle. An imposter.
On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius...
I didn't say anything. I wasn't even looking.
I hear it. I can sense the joke.
Okay. Did you hear the rumor about the butter?
That's not... No, because I didn't mess
Well,
up
I'm going to
yet.
spread it.
This is hot nonsense what's happening. Lots of
I like this
living
because
rent-free
now there's actually he gets his comeuppance when he messes up.
Bicep slowed him down.
Yeah.
On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will answer all sorts of hot nonsense.
God, what is wrong with you?
All sorts of hot nonsense.
But I have to ask you something serious, okay? Why did the raisin go out with the prune? Why? Because he couldn't find a date. All right, let's go. Let's go.
What will the
Answer
genius do,
all
though?
sorts of hot nonsense from YouTube.
Hey, can February march? Can February march? No, but April may.
And lots of Bruce Lee's biceps ain't real.
He was almost there, but he messed up at the end. Do you know my daughter Maria invented a pencil with an eraser on both ends? But I don't see the point.
All right, peeps. That wasn't
That was still a mess up.
No, that wasn't a mess. That was
a mess
That was
up.
like a warm up.
How do you steal a coat? You jack it.
Bruce Lee's biceps ain't real, homie.
No, would slow him down, homie.
Bruce Lee's biceps slowed him down, homie.
Yo, a friend of mine, he didn't pay his exorcist. You know what happened? He got repossessed.
Let's get to it.
It's like the worst he's ever done, ever. What's a bad wizard's favorite program? Spell check.